Hello, I'm Steven Roy Goodman, host of Higher Education Today, a production of the University of the District of Columbia. Welcome back to the education program that connects you to contemporary issues, people, and institutions involved in the world of higher education. Today we'll be talking about studying in China and Chinese language studies here in the U.S. Philmon Haile recently returned from an academic year in Harbin, China, supported by the Seattle-based organization One World Now and the Confucius Institute. Philmon is a current student at Swarthmore College. He was born in Sudan and is fluent in both Mandarin and English. Dr. Shuhan Wang is Deputy Director of the National Foreign Language Center at the University of Maryland. Previously, she served as Executive Director for Chinese Language Initiatives at the Asia Society. She earned her BA at the National Taiwan University and her PhD in Educational Linguistics at the University of Pennsylvania. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, again, thanks for coming on. And maybe if I could start with you, Philmon, if you wouldn't mind saying a word or two about how you made it from Sudan to China. It's an interesting story.
Yeah, it was fascinating. I mean, for me, my family, we immigrated to America when I was 4. We came as refugees of the Eritrean Independence War. But how I really developed my interest in Chinese was in high school. I ran into a program called One World Now. It's a global leadership and language program. It offers Arabic and Chinese and offers leadership courses. And what really makes the program unique is that it focuses on underserved youth, high school students like me, and they support them with studying abroad with scholarships. And in the program, I studied Chinese. And since then, my passion for studying Chinese has just been growing.
And how did you figure out that Chinese was the thing that you wanted to do as opposed to Arabic or as opposed to some other language?
Well, the way I heard about the program was my older brother went through the program himself. He completed the program. He studied abroad in the world now on a scholarship. And he told me about his experiences in China. He brought back pictures. He did work in the countryside. I was just fascinated. But he went in the summer, and I wanted to continue to study Chinese with One World Now. And also, coming from an Eritrean background, I was always in that kind of sphere of just having Eritrean people around me. And I wanted to taste something new. You know, I was always very curious, very passionate type of person. And I really wanted to, just engage a community that I've never been able to engage before. So that's why I picked Chinese.
That's an interesting story. And Shuhan, I'm assuming that Philmon's story is a little bit unique here, that there aren't that many students who are of Eritrean descent who have somehow settled in studying in China. Where do you find most of the students who study in China coming from?
In the United States, we have about 3 major sources of data showing where students are from, and also the number of students. And mostly in the K-12 situation, we have about 60,000 students, and in higher ed, we have also another 60,000 students. But the largest number of students are heritage languages students. They came from Chinese-speaking families, and we have about 150,000 of them in Chinese community schools. So altogether in our country, we have about 270,000 students studying Chinese.
That's a lot of students.
Yes and no, depending how you look at it, because in the K-12 situation, in terms of percentage, it's actually less than 1% of students studying Chinese. And in higher ed, it's less than 4% of students studying Chinese. And according to the 2000 data published by the Modern Language Association, we have about 1,000 students in graduate level courses. That's really not many.
You're saying that in the United States, there are only 1,000 students who are studying Chinese
in the graduate level course.
In all of the United States?
Yes.
That's a very low number.
Very low. In contrast, there are more than 300 million students studying English in China. And it's...
Let me see if I understood what you just said. Did I get that number? There are 300 million students in China studying English, but we only have 1,000 graduate students in the United States studying Chinese.
Right. And if you put all the K-12 to the university level, we have and also heritage communities, we only have 270,000 students studying Chinese.
So then we should be really thankful that Philmon somehow found his way from Sudan to One World Now to China.
Yes, and that really says a lot about we really need to think about innovative ways. He did not go through the traditional path, but on the other hand, we also need to think about how do we enhance and broaden the traditional path as well as this innovative programs.
Well, and that raises an interesting question, I think, Philmon, in terms of if there are so few students studying Chinese, how do you interact with the other students who are studying Chinese? Is there a community of students? Do you get together regularly? How does that work?
With, like Shuhan said, there aren't, most of them are heritage speakers. And the way I interact is that I think we all find a common bond, that we're all studying a foreign language, and that is the common bond. I think we can often look beyond, like who's a heritage speaker and who's not. We study together, we have that common bond that we're all studying Chinese and we all have the China experience, and that's what really makes it. Studying abroad in China, we have the China experience, and that's what makes us have that bond.
But if I understand this correctly, you've actually studied abroad in China twice already.
3 times, actually.
3 times?
Yeah.
And how old are you now, if you don't
I'm
mind?
20.
Okay, so you're 20 years old and you've studied 3 times in China. Wow. All right. Would you mind going through how old you were at each stage and what you did?
Of course. My first time in high school, my first time studying abroad in China was in high school. I was on a One World Now scholarship studying abroad in Anshan, China. It's in northeastern China, and I did my senior year of high school there, and that was just an amazing experience. I felt fully immersed in an ancient and emerging culture. In my high school, I was the only non-Asian student there. Like, there were some Korean foreign students, but I was the only non-Asian. So they'd never seen anybody like me. I was popular, I was the it kid, and it was great. I mean, it was a little rough at first coming in. I went to school 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. It was a commitment, but I loved it. My second time, I was a university student. I guess my second time, I was a university student. I went I went on a Swarthmore College grant to do research. I actually lived in a southern Chinese leper colony for a month and a half doing research with an organization in southern China, and that was just a profound experience. I was working with a population who didn't, because this is southern China, there are many dialects. The people I was working with didn't necessarily speak Mandarin Chinese. That's the national language of China, and so I had to get over those communication barriers and make bonds with people that I've who've never come in contact with foreigners. So that was also an amazing experience. Then my third time, which I just returned from, like you said earlier, I was in Harbin, China, and that was just I went in head first with all my language skills, and it was just an amazing experience. I went and taught English in Western China in a village in Sichuan that was affected heavily by the earthquake. I was a mountaineer's guide for a group. It was just fun. I just hit Chinese society head on. There was just 3 amazing experiences in China.
Wow. Do you expect that, or do you anticipate that maybe you might spend some time in China after you finish college?
I do. I hope to, in the future, to somehow use my Chinese to be of service to somehow, because I felt very, very passionate when I was doing my service work in China, and that's what I hope to do in the future, is to just utilize my Chinese to be of service.
Fair enough. And you mentioned something a second ago that I thought might be relevant to ask you, Shuhan, is the issue of Mandarin and Chinese. Is there a difference, and if so, what is the difference?
There is a difference. Chinese is really a collective term for a family of closely related but mutually unintelligible languages, and those would be what we call fangyan, or dialects or varieties of Chinese and Mandarin. And there are 8 such major dialect families, and under each dialect there are sub-dialects. And Mandarin is one of the 8 dialects, in Chinese, and because it's spoken in the northern part of China, and Beijing is within the region, so it's selected as the official national language, both in Taiwan and in China, and it's also one of the 4 official languages in Singapore. And but in terms of the written language, they all use Chinese character, or what we call Hanzi in Mandarin, and that's mutually everybody uses that. So you often will see people speak different dialects would write to each other, and that's why there's a need to have a standard spoken language, and that's Mandarin.
So, and the students in the United States who are studying Mandarin are studying or they're studying Mandarin then?
In most cases, they are studying Mandarin, but at some universities or some programs, they would have Cantonese, or the Taiwanese or Hakka, different dialects. There are some universities, they offer dialects.
And you're originally from Taiwan, but you're a student and a professor of China generally. How does that work in terms of the historical tensions?
This is very interesting because what you're referring to really is the split, political split of Taiwan and China after 1949. That's part of the contemporary Chinese history, and that's also part of my family history. My father was from mainland China, and he married to my mother, who was her family went to Taiwan 400 years ago, and so she was considered as Taiwanese, And so for a while there was no communication that was allowed. But after 1980s or so, there's no problem. And right now there's no problem communicating and traveling everywhere. And so I do have families in both China and Taiwan, and I do visit them.
And do you think that other students who are thinking about studying in China, who are, let's say, from the United States, that they need to be a little bit sensitive about that split between Taiwan and the mainland?
Generally speaking, I don't think that's a problem. That's a problem for politicians, I think, But, for common people like us, I don't think that's generally a problem. But on the other hand, I think in a way, it really makes us, the compelling argument of the need to study language and culture even more, because that will help students, form their own opinions about various political issues.
Fair enough. I mean, as you know, we have many organizations in the United States and around the world that encourage people to study and to do exchanges. But of course, the political stuff is always there. And I'd be interested for both of you, particularly on your side as a student, did you feel that you couldn't talk about certain political issues when you were traveling throughout China?
Well, as Shuhan just said earlier, their politics isn't a big issue for the regular person. And the feeling I got in China was that politics was sort of irrelevant to your everyday life. So it wasn't a big topic that was discussed. But in China, they have this custom where it's like, in Chinese they say 内人, 外人. So it means like inside person and an outside person. So if you're inside person, you can say anything you want. It's comfortable, social issues, political issues, you can say anything you want. To an outside person, that's not something that's often said. And that's the feeling I got in China. But I did, with my inside people, my friends, my host family, I was comfortable saying anything I wanted to say. I'm comfortable asking questions, and they were very open. But to outside people, I got a little bit of resistance. They didn't really want to talk about it.
Well, let's pretend we're having one of those inside conversations now, without all the bright lights in a studio. Would you feel comfortable in asking me about human rights aspects of life in China?
If it was an inside person, yes. An inside person, I would, just my friends, we talked about this kind of stuff. And yeah.
And what do some Chinese students have to say about that?
Well, what they often say is that there is a misconception. Like they say that people on the outside are not understanding fully what's happening in China, and sometimes that they're grossly exaggerated what's going on. That's what they sometimes feel, because what I've noticed in China, most Chinese people are very nationalistic. They love their China. And actually, in Chinese, China, 中国, is a mixture of, in the word for country in China, 国家, it's the word for kingdom and the word for home juxtaposed, put together. So other people think they're the country as their homes. People are very, very nationalistic, so they really don't want to say anything too bad about China, but they really just think that other people on the outside are just over-exaggerating it. And sometimes they even say they're bullying us. That's something that's sometimes often said.
That's interesting. But my understanding, my read of China is that the Chinese government in particular is focused on the economic development in China. From your time in China, would you agree, and would you both agree, that the economic engine of China is what's really driving China?
I would say yes and no in the sense of every country, economic development is important, and that is the biggest topic in the United States as well, And on the other hand, I'm also agreeing with Philmon in the sense of the notion of rights and a lot of different issues that we have. It's also very culturally bound. That's why it really is important to understand various issues from multiple perspectives. If we only try to understand China from American perspective, it's not going to work. We have to understand, from multiple perspectives, and even in China, it's such a huge, diverse country. There's no monolithic view on anything either, And so I would say that students really need to are encouraged to study from as much as possible and try to form their opinion from observation, discussing with various peers and experts, and read and study and think on their own feet. Yeah, really, because we really have to be critical, and that is one way to study another language and culture. Think about how do we broaden our worldview and have multiple perspectives and think critically.
And to that point, how would you advise a student who's thinking about either studying linguistics or international relations? Because it almost seems like we're getting very close to this fine line here, where yes, your specialty is linguistics, and obviously you've studied Chinese, and know it very well. But there are scholars in our universities who focus on international relations and the relationships between countries, and of course there are sociologists, and there are all sorts of people who are studying these academic disciplines in lots of different ways. How would you kind of parse out what a student who's interested in China would do if they wanted to study these different fields?
I would say, language really is the foundation, because you can study various, like sociology or international area studies and so forth, but without the foundation of language, it's not going to go deep. And you can be an expert, but still there's that difference between 内人 and 外人, in the sense of outsider and insider. Yeah, and so I would say that would be the foundation, and from there you branch out to explore your interest.
Fair enough. And Philmon, how would you advise a student who gets off a plane in China tomorrow morning? What are they going to see that is such a surprise?
Well, like Shuhan said earlier, China is very, very diverse. Depends where they go in China,
Fair
obviously, enough. Yeah. But I guess if talking from my experience, I was in Harbin. When I got off the airport in Harbin, I noticed that it smelled. not that it smelled, but there was. Because Harbin is such an industrial city that there's so many factories. I noticed that kind of hit me the second I got off the train. When they're also when I got off my plane and got out of the airport, when they noticed that when they get into the city, packed. Not so much the city sidewalks, but public transportation. When you take the bus, for example, I always was taking public transportation, getting from A to B, and what I noticed was the bus driver, there was no limit to how many people would fit on the bus. So they got as many people onto the bus as possible, and sometimes it was just face against the door. I was packed onto the bus, and that's something I did not experience ever in China. And then, again, like Shuhan said earlier, there's just a plethora of experiences, just things you could see. Beijing is a totally different experience. Shanghai is a totally different experience. The village that I went to, obviously, a totally different experience every single time. But those are some of the major things that hit me when I went to Harbin.
And what about the air quality?
Air quality. I like to run a lot. So in China, I ran a little less because, especially in Harbin, and especially because of the location of my school. It was right next to a pharmaceutical factory. And again, those factories are everywhere in Harbin. The air quality was not as good, so I didn't run too much, but it didn't hinder me. Besides not being able to run too much on some days, the air was really clear. It really depends on, I think maybe the factory schedule. But it really just depends on, but it didn't hinder my life at all. It didn't make me like couldn't go outside. I think that's the narrative that the public pollution in China is so bad that, oh no, I can't even go outside. Or, you see these people in the news are always wearing their masks. not everybody in China wears masks. I think that's some of my friends would say that who've never studied abroad. They say like, oh, are you wearing that mask, Philmon? I'm like, no, I'm not. Come on, guys. I mean, so I think that's the misunderstanding. But it doesn't hinder. It didn't hinder me, at least.
Fair enough. And Philmon, if you don't mind me asking you a personal question on air about your personal life. You're an engaging young man. You were in China. You don't particularly look Chinese. How did things work out socially for you in China?
Well, you can bet somebody in China has never seen anybody like me before, right? Eritrean, black, fluent in Chinese. So they were just shocked. They were a lot of people. For example, I would often have to tell people that I was half Chinese. So for them to believe, like that because I'd only been studying Chinese for 2 years at the time, and they just wouldn't believe me that, why are you Chinese so good? And I often told them I was half Chinese. But people were mostly respectful. And I have to also say another thing where while I was in China, I was very intentional about engaging a community that did not really have the opportunity to engage with foreigners, talk to foreigners. So I was going mainly for the working class, and so I was in back alleys eating meals for 2 or 3 renminbi, and that is, that's where most of the working class was, and I wanted to communicate with those people. So that's why I was getting those really just radical reactions from people. They're just like, wow, like why is that foreigner here? Why is he eating back here? There's a restaurant across the street where all the other foreigners are eating. Why isn't he there? But I was really intentional about talking to that community and learning more. And so I got more of those radical reactions, like staring. And another story I could share is people sometimes would actually feel my hair. Like people would want to feel my hair. One example was when I was on the bus, actually. This is actually really, really funny. I was sitting back in my seat, and the person behind me, my hair at the time was longer. It was, you could say kind of sort of dreadlocky, but not really. It was longer. And so they'd never seen anything like that. I was often asked, is my hair real? And the person behind me was feeling my hair. And I felt his finger stroke the back of my neck. I jumped. I looked behind me. He was embarrassed, and he hit his face out the window. He was like, just didn't want to look at me, didn't want to acknowledge that he was there. I thought it was hilarious, and I engaged him in a conversation. I was like, well, you were just feeling my hair, and he was laughing about it. It was great, but people were just curious, as they should be. If they've never seen anybody like me before, I don't blame them. It's fun.
That's a very funny story. Good for you. Shuhan, has anyone ever felt your hair on any public buses in China?
No, not really.
But in all seriousness, we only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to kind of speak to the issue of encouraging more students to study abroad, particularly to have these experiences. Philmon, you just gave a great overview of why it's so terrific to study abroad and to really get into the trenches of life overseas. How do we encourage more students to do this? And perhaps not everybody's as adventurous as you are, but I bet we could probably do more as a country to encourage more students to do this.
Yeah, well, I would say, the most important thing is that study abroad is not just a right of the rich and the elites, It's actually for everybody. And there are opportunities out there. People just are not aware of it. And for example, the State Department has Nestle Y, and that offers a full scholarship for students to go to study abroad in select countries, and there are also Fulbright Haile and Fulbright scholarship as well. And StarTalk program is. I would probably say that's the preliminary step before they go study abroad, because the study also showed that if they go to study abroad without having preparation of the language and culture and society, it's going to be actually reinforcing their stereotyping. So StarTalk is summer program, that allowed them the opportunity, and in fact, that was how Philmon started, to be in that kind of environment. Get yourself prepared and look for opportunities. School counselors and various online, programs, you can find opportunities to go.
And you both are here for a conference now, if I'm not mistaken. And what's the purpose of the conference?
Well, I'll let Shuhan do a little more of the explaining about the conference, as she is at StarTalk. But my experience with StarTalk was they're an organization, dedicated to supporting the education of undertaught languages such as Farsi, Arabic, Chinese in the United States. And it's a U.S. government initiative. And I just want to say a little bit first, because I'll actually be a keynote speaker at the conference talking about my experiences in China.
Tell the story about your hair. That's a great story.
Yes.
You can talk about whatever you want, but I think that's a great story.
It's great. I always love telling it.
That's lovely. And StarTalk, as we said earlier, it's one of the initiatives under National Security Language Initiative enacted in 2006. And its mandate is to expand increase the number of American students and teachers who are able to learn and teach critical languages, such as Arabic, Chinese, Hindi, Urdu, Turkish, and so forth. And so last year alone, we have 156 programs nationally, and we offer programs for students in kindergarten all the way to university to learn those languages. So as well, we also offer teacher training and teacher education as well through those programs.
Terrific. Well, I'm going to wish you both luck at the conference, continued good luck with your work. It's important work, and I don't know if we'll ever match the percentage or the numbers of people in China who study English, but I think you've both made a very convincing case for why we should have more American students try to study Chinese, try to understand life in China more, and I think that will help people here in the United States, people in China, and the world. So thank you both for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you would like additional information about One World Now or the National Foreign Language Center, please visit oneworldnow.org or nflc.org. If you have comments or suggestions about higher education today, please send an email to our viewer mailbox at highereducationtoday@topcolleges.com. Thank you for watching. We will continue to bring you quality discussions about important matters in today's college and university world. Please join me again for another edition of Higher Education Today. I'm Steven Roy Goodman, and you've been watching Higher Education Today.